Charlotte's Morning News.
8:40 here at News Talk 1110. Bob Chapman's an economist. He joins us live on the Newsmaker line here on News Talk 1110 WBT. Hey, Bob.
Well, good morning.
Hey, thanks for getting up in the middle of the night. I know it's early out there in Texas, and I appreciate it. Hey, Bob, what's up with CIT? And first of all, people think this is Citigroup, and it's not. Who is CIT, and what's the deal on these people?
Well, CIT Financial is a company that lends to marginal companies, usually in the retail and in the manufacturing business, and very much so in the garment manufacturing business. And they've been around for many years, and they usually charge around 10 to 20%, and the inventory is what backs up the loans. And so they've been lending to many people for many years, and evidently there were a number of companies that just couldn't make it, and so they have a lot of bad debt. Last June, the federal government, the U.S. taxpayer, gave the company a loan of $2.3 billion, and obviously it wasn't enough, and it looks like it's going to turn out the same way that AIG, GM, and Chrysler have, and it's unfortunate. They're going into a prepackaged bankruptcy, which means they'll be out of bankruptcy in about a month. And that means that it can continue to function. And the reason why is the bondholders made a deal where they would receive 70 cents on the dollar in a new bond issue, and they put up a total of $7.5 billion. The question is, what's going to happen with the economy? And I think that for the future of CIT, which has nothing to do with Citigroup or Citibank, what is it going to be like? Well, if consumers continue to cut back on their purchases, well, I think maybe CIT is going to have a rough time surviving.
Golly. Bob, why aren't the banks, and I'm sitting here, over my right shoulder is the headquarters of Bank of America, and but why aren't the banks lending? What's the deal here? Why won't they cut loose with some of their money so that we can get things going?
Well, they're carrying two sets of books, and what they've been doing is dumping their bad assets, their bad loans, their bad bonds, that no longer trade at what they initiated them at, but perhaps 10 or 20 or 30 or 40 cents on the dollar. And so in order to offset that and not take any great risk, they borrow money from the Federal Reserve, and the Fed creates it out of thin air. They take that money, usually at about 0.5 of 1%, and they reinvest it with the Fed at 3.5%, which is kind of a win-win situation.
I'll say.
And so that's the main reason, the bad assets on their books, that they're not doing the lending that we would like them to. Their lending is down 14% year on year. And if they went back and started lending the way they were before and made up that minus 14%, and they had another stimulus package of perhaps $800 billion, it might buy the administration another year of the economy going sideways. But the sad point of this is, from an economic viewpoint, all of this stuff is not going to work because it's temporary. And they have to get to the real problem. And the real problem is, in our system, bankrupt companies have to be allowed to go bankrupt. There should be nothing called too big to fail, and that includes Bank of America. And I think they're going to have to come to terms with that sooner or later.
Have you read, I'm just getting started by reading Mr. Sorkin's book, Too Big to Fail, because this kind of stuff really fascinates me. I go all the way back to, I read this book called Serpent on the Rock about the failure of Prudential Insurance. And I'm no economist. Matter of fact, I tell people I used to use that Paul Samuelson Econ 101 book whenever I had insomnia. When I was in college.
I had the same book, and number 2, yes.
But anyway, I am interested in this stuff, and of course, Bank of America, a huge driver of the economy here in Charlotte, and that's another story that we could talk about trying to find a successor there. bottom line there is who wants to run an organization when your salary is controlled by the government? That is not the way it works. So
well, I think there's more to it than that, and I think Mr. Lewis departed because he didn't like what the Fed was demanding of Bank of America.
Which is?
For them to buy CDOs, collateralized debt obligations, and other undesirable debt. And what the Fed's been doing is relieving some banks of these CDOs, and we don't know what they're paying, but I'll assume they're paying 50 cents on the dollar. And they're asking banks like Bank of America to take in that paper at perhaps 20 cents on the dollar. And who knows whether the paper's ever going to be any good. And I think that's what Mr. Lewis was upset about.
Golly, if these organizations, AIG, GM, whatever, are allowed to fail, everybody says, they just can't because it'll destroy the economy. Obviously, you don't agree with that.
No, in classical economics, you have to allow the economy to be purged when it's been abused, and it's never been abused the way it has, in the last several years in history. We have banks which normally lend 8 to 10 times their asset base, which is deposits. And that seemed, over the centuries to be normal. These banks and brokerage firms were lending 40 and 50 and 60 and 70 times. I mean, they knew it was going to be terminal someday. They knew that the banking system was not a casino. What could they conceivably been thinking of?
Bob, I got to leave it there because I'm up against the clock here, but it's a fascinating subject to be sure, and I really appreciate you getting up and bringing us the information in layman's terms. Thanks a million, Bob. I do appreciate it.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Bye-bye. Bob Chapman here on News Talk 1110 WBT.